Today I'm back out of the zoo using the Nikon Z8. Along with that, I'm using the Nikon Z 400mm 4.5 lens. Now, for those of you out there that have followed me for a little bit, you've perhaps heard me say in the past how I believe the 400mm range is the perfect range for zoo photography. And this lens is truly making me stand by that comment. Now, the one thing that you'll find using just a fixed focal length lens is that you're going to have to use your feet. And what I mean by using your feet is moving forward or moving backwards a little bit to get the composition that you're hoping to get. Now, the one thing that I'm doing with the Nikon Z8 using the 400mm 5.6 lens is I'm making it a point to use the APS-C crop factor. And what I've done is I've programmed the record button on the camera to be the APS-C on and off button. When I go ahead and use the APS-C function on the camera, this lens becomes a 600mm 4.5. Pretty amazing when you think about the fact that a 600mm f4 lens would cost you about $15,000 to $18,000. And the fact that you could go ahead and use the APS-C mode on this Nikon Z8 with the 400mm 4.5 and get to f4.5 lens at 600mm is pretty amazing. I know a lot of Nikon shooters out there have been anxiously waiting for years, it seems now, for a pro-level Nikon Z camera that's APS-C. And we continue to wait. There has been some very weak rumors of it perhaps happening now in 2026. A 20 megapixel Z50 is nice, but I think we need a 33 megapixel APS-C camera at the very least. And if we get really spoiled, it would be a 45 megapixel camera. That would just be amazing with this lens. This lens weighs just under 3 pounds. It's really small. I actually photographed a football game towards the end of last year, and I took with me the 400mm f4.5 lens along with the 70 to 200mm lens, and I would put the two lenses down on the ground, and I would go ahead and switch between the two lenses as the action was changing on me. And at one point, I'm like, wow, this is crazy. This 400mm 4.5 lens actually feels lighter than the 70 to 200mm lens does. Now, I've also gone ahead and attached the 1.4 extender to the lens and camera combination. And by attaching the 1.4 extender, I'm getting all the way to 840mm. Now, I do lose the stop of light, making this an f6.3. But think about the fact that when I go ahead and use the 1.4 extender with the crop factor, my aperture is still just 6.3, and I've gone all the way out to 840mm. That's pretty amazing. And the funny thing about it is that the 400mm 4.5 lens, I don't think is a lens that many people pay much attention to out there. I know that I struggled making the decision to go ahead and purchase it, but I wanted to have something that was just a bit faster than the 6.3 lenses that I have in the 180 to 600 or in the 800mm lens. I wanted to be able to go out and photograph birds or wildlife just a tad bit earlier by having a 4.5 aperture compared to the 6.3 lens. And I also wanted to be able to throw out the background as much as I could possibly do. And I wasn't going to go out and get a 2.8 lens, but a 4.5 right now seems to be working out pretty good. One thing with this lens is that it doesn't focus as close as you would want it to, because if it did focus a bit closer, you would be able to go ahead and throw out that background even more, because you'd be able to fill in the frame and get closer to your subject. And that closest focusing distance for the 400mm 4.5 lens is actually 9.2 feet. This Nikon 400mm 4.5 lens weighs in at just 2.7 pounds. The lens is actually shorter than a foot. It's 9.7 inches long. And the lens can actually have a 95mm filter attached to it. That's really going to come in handy for people that are doing video, and if they want to attach an ND filter to the front of the lens. This lens does come with a lens hood, and when it's on sale, you can buy it for just a little bit over $3,000. It's a whole lot cheaper than using a 600mm f4 lens when you go ahead and factor that you could use the 400mm 4.5 in the APS-C mode and get out to 600mm at 4.5. One setting that I've changed recently on the Nikon Z8 is a setting where you could actually turn the focus ring on the camera. I would always make sure that I took away the ability to manual focus, and I've gone ahead and turned it back to where you can actually manual focus. And the reason for that is that when the camera is struggling to focus, it now gives me the ability to go ahead and manually help the camera out and find the focus. I got a great opportunity with this tree where the birds were flying to it. I was able to go ahead and spot them with the 400mm 4.5 lens. I started out taking pictures with the 1.4 extender, but I was really having a lot of difficulty trying to focus on the birds. So then I went ahead and removed it. I've taken these photos here with a 400mm 4.5 lens without the 1.4 extender attached. using the Nikon Z8. I'm having to go ahead and adjust myself as far as not getting too much backlight coming through the tree, making the bird dark. I'm able to use the exposure compensation button to go ahead and quickly change my exposures. There's a substantial amount of clouds today, and every once in a while you'll get lucky and get some cloud cover, but that does make it a challenge to photograph these birds and make sure you get the exposure correctly, especially when they're up in a tree. Another challenge is to make sure that there's not a twig that's actually crossing their face or crossing a part of the body where it's just going to ruin the photograph. The twigs behind it makes it a lot easier to get rid of them if I wanted to go ahead and do that, but a twig in front of it won't be so much fun to deal with. And I really like to get my pictures right out of camera and do as little as possible removing of anything as I possibly can. I feel it's a much more creative challenge to get it right in camera than it is to sit in the computer and just do it that way. What I'm doing with the Nikon Z8, the top custom function button at the front of the camera, custom function button number 1, I've set that so that I can go ahead and pinpoint the focus box, and then that way I can place it on the animal's eye, and that's helping a little bit with acquiring focus. I'm using the APS-C mode quite a bit here on these photos, but sometimes it's a little too tight, and then if I turn off the APS-C mode and go back to where I'm not cropping at all, the picture will be a little bit too wide. The pictures where I'm actually getting the grass that's in front of them to help with the composition and actually framing the subject using the foliage that's in front of it. This is going to conclude the video today using the Nikon Z8 along with the Nikon Z 400mm 4.5 lens. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I ask you to please like and subscribe.